This is amazing. I am so excited to be here today. And because there is so much energy and enthusiasm that I feel already in the room, I'm a little bummed to sort of start it out on a down note. The down note is a little bit, it's kind of about, hold on a second. Have you heard that the robots are coming to take our jobs? I'm having trouble a little bit. There we go. The robots are coming to take our jobs. And I would love to be here to give you the good news that they're not here to take our jobs, but in fact, actually, they are here to take our jobs. But it's not completely all doom and gloom, and it isn't all just about technology. In fact, there's going to be a lot of other factors that are going to impact our jobs as well, including technological change, globalization, demographics, environmental sustainability, urbanization, inequality, political uncertainty. There's a lot of stuff that's going to change the future of work. It's not going to be just technology. And there are some really interesting things that are happening today in the demographics. We have essentially in the United States full employment, and yet it's very interesting that that we're seeing some really interesting populations that are opting out of the workforce, specifically males from 16 to 25 years old. And we don't really quite know why that is. I should probably ask my own son because he's headed on the fast path into this demographic. Unfortunately, but graduates are making less money than they would, and we're seeing people who get degrees who are underemployed. So there's some kind of disturbing statistics. But we did some research at Pearson a little while ago, and we didn't want to just ask the question around what are the jobs that are going to disappear. We wanted to sort of frame it in a different way, and so we asked the question of if you were born today and you entered the workforce in the year 2030, what are the skills that you're going to need to be able to be successful in those roles? And that was part of the reason why we did a little bit of the poll, because I was very curious to see how people would think about technology related to these three areas, right? And everyone was pretty confident that technology was going to change and disrupt the retail industry and take away a lot of the jobs. We're already seeing that happen today. In fact, that is very much true. This is an area that's going to get widely disrupted. But it's not all bad news, because I don't know if you've ever heard of something called fit shops, which is sort of a new way that we think about retail, where people will go in, they'll try stuff on, they'll get help and consultation, and there are people there that are doing all this great service work, and there's no transaction that actually takes place in that shop. You actually go home, you go online, you go buy it. But the retail experience still exists. It still is very personal, and there's still people that are very much needed in that type of environment. Teacher, I saw everybody said, nope, teachers are going to be good, they're all good to go, and you know what, good news, you're right. Teachers are going to be widely in demand, and even though technology is changing the way people are learning and where they learn and how they learn, that personal interaction is going to be even more important going down the road, especially as people have to learn over the course of their lifetime. Librarian is always a tricky one, because I saw a lot of people say that, yep, but librarians that job's probably going to go away. And if you look at just the job title, you're probably right. But if you think about the underlying skills of a librarian, those are actually going to be really critical skills moving forward. If you think about librarians as people who help us find information, curate information, evaluate information, those are things in a world where we are filled with and flooded with information that are going to be even more important down the road. So you may not see the job title librarian, you may see information scientist or information data gatherer or something like that, but the skill set is going to be widely in demand going down the road. And when I said that it's not going to be completely all bad news, which is good, and that the robots are going to come to take our jobs, it's not horrible. The World Economic Forum estimates that by the year 2022 that 75 million roles will be impacted or cut because of technology, but actually that could represent an increase of 133 million new roles for everybody out there. And when we did this research, we looked at what are the skills that you're going to need for these jobs, especially when we don't even really know what those jobs are going to be. And so here are the top 10 skills and knowledge that we looked at. And I think you'll find some things that are pretty interesting up here. You'll see things like social perceptiveness, originality, fluency of ideas, active learning. And you'll find those mixed in with some of the knowledge and skills that are important, like sociology and anthropology or psychology. And I'm sure that this list might surprise a lot of people because you don't see things like math or, or biology. And trust me, they're there. They're just a little further down the list. But this list represents the skills and the knowledge that really make us uniquely human. And that, my friends, is going to be what is transferable over the course of all of these years. Because if it's the human skills that are going to allow us to be able to work with and alongside all of the robots, right? And so you're going to need some technical skills, don't get me wrong, but it's the uniquely human skills that are really going to make a difference. And we already see this happening today, where there's an increase in demand, even in the last 20 years, for people who have these types of skills, even more so than the math skills. And the other thing that I wanted to sort of say is that when you think about how people are going to have to learn, it's not just a matter of the different types of skills, it's also going to be about how long you're going to have to learn, right? I don't know if you've seen any of this research, but the people that are born today are going to live to be 150 years old. So let's do just a little back of the napkin math here. And when I think about that, let's say you're in formal education for 20 years, right? It's about what people do. And let's be generous and say you're going to get to retire for 30 years. That's awesome. You're going to be in the workforce. These people are going to be in the workforce for 100 freaking years. 100 freaking years. All I can say is, thank God I am not in that demographic. And the work is going to look quite different, right? It used to be that you'd play for 5 years, you'd go to school for 20, and then you'd get a job, and then you would, be in that job for the next 20, 30, 40 years, right? But now what the world's going to look like is you're going to play for a little while, then you're going to learn, then you're going to do a job, then you're going to learn, then you're going to do a job, you're going to learn. The learning is going to be constant, because if you're in the workforce for 100 years, that high school diploma, that community college degree, that four-year degree, that graduate degree, none of that's going to be enough. You're going to have to keep learning. You're going to have to keep upskilling and reskilling. That's just the way it's going to work. The good news is some of these universities are starting to think about it this way. And one of the things that they're thinking about is this concept of an open loop university, right? That it's not linear. You don't come in, you don't stay for 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, or 10 years, which will be what my son's the plan that my son's on. But if you, and that, by the way, is a very expensive plan. And but the open loop university is interesting because they're sort of acknowledging that you're going to come in and you're going to go out. It's not going to be linear, right? And that they're going to be there to serve you when you need it. And not just for the time that you get out of high school, but for the time that you're progressing all the way through your life. So I'm really encouraged by these kinds of conversations and this kind of a model, and I'm really hopeful that this is the way education starts to evolve. And I wanted to sort of leave you here with some of my thoughts about what does all of this mean if you are a parent? What does this mean if you are an employer? And what does this just mean to you as an individual? So I wanted to sort of give you some of my thoughts, having been in this space for quite a while. When I think about it from a parent's perspective, let's just set my son aside for a second. But when I think about parents, I think that it's really important that you prepare people for a lifetime of learning. Get them in the mindset that it doesn't stop after they get their degree, right? You've really got to start to build that mindset early on. The other thing is that work experience is really key. And interestingly enough, this generation is actually working less than any prior generation. And yet it's that work experience, it's actually the place where you have the most opportunity to build up those personal and social capabilities. So I would highly encourage people to encourage their kids to work when they're in high school, work when they're in college. I mean, it is absolutely critical and one of the biggest factors that employers look for when they're actually hiring people. And finally, broaden sort of the thinking about higher education, that there are lots of different pathways for people. It is not just one pathway, and there are lots of different ways that people can actually start to, to prepare themselves for the workforce. And the reason why this is so important is because the stakes are particularly high when you're thinking about education. 68% of the students today leave with some form of debt, and the average amount of debt that people have coming out of school is $37,000. It's criminal. And I will say that it's even worse when you think that 4 in 10 of the people who got bachelor's degrees are underemployed. And you know what that means? You know what underemployed means? That means you could have gotten the job without the bachelor's degree. Brutal. And it's I will say, when you get to when you start to think about it in terms of debt, the domino effect that this has is really, really important. And I wanted to share a couple of tweets that I've seen, because they really sort of give you a sense of what this is about. If we could just move the slide deck forward, there we go. So here are two of my favorites. Here's one person that says, "I made my last student loan payment today," and the person goes, "I look forward to tweeting that in the year 2073. And then here's my other favorite. "What would you do if someone left you $8.7 million? Well, I'd pay off my student loans and use the remaining $10 to go to a movie." It is depressing. Anyway, and when you look at it this way, the average age of financial independence in 1983 was 26, and today it is 30. So if you were an employer, employers, I think, have a real responsibility here. And one thing that they can do is they can actually start to map the job descriptions to skills, because the more detail we get around the skills that are required for a job, the better the signals are to academia, the learner, to everybody. And this is really lacking today. Job descriptions are pretty vague. They're hard to sort of navigate. And there's a real responsibility here, I think, for employers to take a look at this. The other is to help as much as possible expand opportunities for flexible work-based learning. We got to open up as many opportunities for people to get that type of experience as possible. And they really also, I think there's a lot of activity going on around exploring, creating, endorsing, and validating what we call alternative credentials. Doesn't mean the degree isn't important, but it means that there potentially are other pathways that you can take in an intermediate step or even after you to get a degree that are really going to help. Here are some examples of employers who actually even today are not requiring a degree for a job, and they do it for different reasons. But if you think about even Google or Apple, it's interesting to see them on the list. Part of that's because they are looking for very specific skills that they are not finding when people are coming out of school, and so they're willing to accept other alternative credentials that show that you're able to do that so that you can actually get a job. And this trend is going to continue to grow. Northeastern University just released a research report a few months ago that said that 55% of employers agree that micro-credentials, this sort of alternative credentials, are likely to diminish the emphasis on degrees in hiring over the next 5 to 10 years. So that's happening now, right? Again, doesn't mean that a degree isn't important, just means that there are other pathways along the route that might help you get there faster, cheaper, and then maybe lead yourself back into a degree down the road. And finally, as an individual, how can you think about what all of this means and what these future skills are all about? The first thing is, I think, don't underestimate those personal and social capabilities, right? These are the things that make us human, that are going to help us when we're making all of this digital transformation. Doesn't mean you don't need hard skills. You still need to you need to train up and upskill around those hard skills, but really build and develop and advertise the soft skill piece of it, right? Because that is what the employers are saying they're missing today. And the other thing I would say is, if you're at the point where you're already in a job and you know that you should be upskilling and reskilling, it is interesting to me that about 80% of employers offer some sort of educational assistance package, actually pay you to go back to school or help you financially with learning and development, and yet less than 3% of the people take them up on it. Are we crazy? That's insane. It's like money. They're like handing it out and you're not taking advantage of it. I mean, it's really insane to me. And so I would say that's really something you should take a look at. The employers are not going to tell you what to do. They're not going to give you the guided path of here are the skills that you should be learning. I mean, I wish they would, and I hope that they do, but they really don't do that today. But you can take responsibility for that, take advantage of the resources that are out there and the benefits that are out there, and make a difference for yourself. I mean, there's a lot of power in that. So hopefully I didn't leave you too depressed. Hopefully this was like more energizing and you're excited about the future. And if anything, even though the robots are coming, you should be super excited to know that you have a lot of control over how you learn, what you learn, how often you learn, and you should be really deliberate and really proactive about that, because that is what's going to change your life. Thank you, guys.